Hello, I'm Patchru. Today I'm casting HeptaCraft. It is a mod for Starcraft 2 that features 7 factions, and today we'll be looking at 2 of those factions in this game. I will try to be giving a comprehensive breakdown of what's occurring as it happens, but sometimes I will have to leave details out to focus on the gameplay.
Welcome, Commander.
In HeptaCraft, you have the option to play. I'll just turn the sound down. You have the option to play from 7 different races which you choose in-game. You can random between them. In this case, Jonarific in the top right is playing as the Orange Dominion, and Balthazar in the top left is playing as the Khala. Teal Khala, I believe. In the other game, the gameplay is styled a lot more to be like Brood War, a little bit. Some of the teams are more focused on Brood War. Some of the gameplay elements from StarCraft 2 have been minimized, such as the macro elements. Certain teams favor bigger sprawling games and other teams favor fighting straight on. If you've seen a lot of StarCraft 2, this will all seem very familiar to you. Most notable is each team features certain base defense mechanics. So in this case, Dominion has the ability to turn on their planetary fortress for 10 seconds, and then it can attack nearby enemies within the ring around it. Likewise, the Protoss, the Khala, sorry, they are like your Brood War style Protoss, and they have stasis ground, which allows them to lock units in an area into a stasis. It allows you to sort of stall enemy harass or split up enemy forces as they try and attack you. These elements were to minimize losing the game off simple harass, and overall the game is meant to be not so heavily influenced by how many resources you gather and more about how you play. And to some extent that has worked, and to other extents, you know, it's really it's still a game that's growing and developing as time goes on, and 7 factions is quite impressive. So the Dominion we have here is the tankier sort of Terran team. They have some of the strongest units in the game for sheer force of power of damage, and many of these units, they're somewhat more expensive. They're slower to build, slower to move, and it can overall give Dominion a very sort of slow play style, but it's rewarded by having the stronger units and being able to beat people in the face. It all depends on how aggressive your opponent is being. Later on in the game, it's very hard to topple a Dominion army. However, you can outnumber it because Dominion has a somewhat harder time taking multiple bases. They sort of have to push out with their forces, take the base, push out with the forces, take the base. They can't just directly rush out. You can see here, John has chosen not to wall in with his barracks and supply depots. I think that might just be a preference thing because of the proximity to the Ibex cannon. If someone comes in and tries to harass, you have the option to shoot them. And so it's not really easy for people to come in. However, there is over here a Dragoon walking around from the Protoss end. Dragoons attack slowly. They have a timing delay on their attacks, which can be somewhat limiting for them, but they do a lot of damage. The problem is they can't kite very well. They're much a direct fighting unit. This should be able to get away. I think it does outrun the Marines, and yes, it does. So it can outrun the Marines at this time and will not go down. Very standard sort of opening for both sides. We have a single gateway into an expansion. The cybernetics core was no doubt rushed as to access Dragoons as quickly as possible, as it's very hard for many teams to deal with Dragoons' strength. Their sheer strength is not overwhelming, but certainly enough to drive most enemies off. Here John is now going for his expansion as well. He'll likely, off the back of this tank that he's built, go in and drive these Dragoons away. Dragoons are armored, and the tank will do additional damage to them. It doesn't have siege mode yet, but when it does have siege mode, it will be absolutely terrifying for damage. As you can see, it already does 40 damage to armored, and these Dragoons only have about 200 health, so 5 shots from a tank can kill a Dragoon. And with those Marines supporting it, the tank can easily handle 2 Dragoons. Likewise, Balthazar here is going into a robo bay, robo facility and a robo bay. This is likely to get a shuttle and Reaver. These are units from Starcraft Brood War. What a Reaver does when you use Reaver Shuttle Harass, you drop your Reaver, you pick it up with the shuttle, you move over to near the enemy, preferably behind their lines. You drop the Reaver down, it fires out a projectile, you pick it up, and you move away. And it explodes a bunch of units because of the massive AoE. However, shuttle can hold up to 2 Reavers, so you can drop 2, or you can just leave them there for the time being. The reason you typically pick them up is to take them out of harm's way from surprises, such as the Ibex cannon. If that was turned on, your Reaver would get shot each time it landed, unless it's right up in the back, maybe. Dominion does not have scan. They're actually one of the most vulnerable teams in terms of vision. The only way they can really check out what the enemy has is through pressuring up, building some structures. If you build a very far out sensor tower, then you can see enemy movements. Doesn't tell you the buildings much, but you can tell the movements. You can get some Cerberus to rush over and sort of just try and harass minions, trying to harass your workers, or you can go into your starport where there is a unit called the Harpy, which is specifically intended to scout for you. Here we have 3 Dragoons breaking the rocks that enter into John's base. This likely means that later in the game, Balthazar intends to run a large force up here. He's probably going to start producing many more Dragoons and military units. There we go. He's building the Reaver now for the military harass, and he's getting the increased speed for shuttles, so he'll be able to get in and out a lot faster with these Reavers. I do suspect he'll start producing, yeah, there we go, he's got a 3rd gateway building, so he's going to start building a massive unit, and then he's going to use his Reaver harass to get ahead and likely draw some forces away from the front line, and then he can come up and start bullying into here. However, worth noting, you see this line? That is the tank's range. Dominion siege tanks have a massive range of 15. This can actually get even longer. There is a day-night mechanic in this game where certain teams, every 2 minutes, it switches between day and night. And certain teams, oh, there's the Reaver harass, I'll talk about this first. So there you go, there's the first hit. That was quite a few workers, if I can just remember the worker command. Oh, sorry. Well, I can't remember what the worker command is, so I'll just get... There we go. Thought it was. So workers killed. John has killed 4. John has lost 4 workers to that Reaver attack. Sometimes if you see the Reaver coming, what you do is you run 1 worker towards it to take the hit and die for the rest of your workers to minimize the overall impact. But Reavers are very hard to see because there's not a lot of alarm. Shuttles are actually quite small on the minimap and can blend in easily, especially on this lighter ground with that team colory. It doesn't stand out particularly well, so you have to keep a very careful eye. Putting a missile turret around the back sounds good, but sometimes it's very difficult to spend those resources if you're facing early pressure, or if you're trying to build up, you don't want to spend too much. However, sometimes a missile turret is worth the 4 workers you would otherwise lose. It appears that, where did that shuttle go? There he is. There are people keeping on the watchtowers. I like that he's left a worker there. Worker, I'd prefer a marine, but that's fairly straightforward and safe. Scarab damage is currently being upgraded. You can increase it by an additional 25. I can't show you currently what it is. That's the Reaver attack, the Scarabs. And meanwhile, John is upgrading the armor of his structures. Because Dominion have some of the best defenses in the game. I also like this positioning of just a few Marines and a Viking. It means that should a shuttle come this way, it will take a lot of heat, and even if he drops the Reaver and kills the Marines, there's nothing he can do about the Viking, and he will likely lose that shuttle unless there is help nearby. John is now placing down a sensor turret. That will also help him protect and see what's coming. So he can easily defend from those Reaver attacks. John's just scouting now, making sure there's no cheeky bases. Sometimes people like to expand into strange corners. He's just making sure that his opponent hasn't completely out-expanded him, because he is going for his 3rd, and he wants to make sure that his opponent's maybe on 3 or 4 bases, and no more. There was another Reaver harass, along with some Zealots. I think 1 Zealot was dropped and may have died, taking the tank shots, but the Reaver can still be fairly safely dropped, and I don't know, these siege tanks might cause some trouble. This is actually more dangerous because now the shuttle has a long way to go. I don't think Vikings... Yeah, Vikings should be able to keep up with the shuttle speed. Vikings are actually quite fast. Dominion really lack air options other than Vikings. They have medivacs, but the infantry for Dominion is sort of one of their less impressive sides. They have the Harpy, which John has right here, which is a scout unit. He's actually going to scout. We'll follow along with it. They have access to the science vessel from Brood War. There we go. He scouted out the shuttle, so he's going to retreat that. But the Harpy's just going to fly through now. It's going to fly over, right past. There we go. It's seen the base, and it's going to leave. So he scouted out. He can see that. Did John see? He saw the Templar archives, so he can expect Templars coming. He didn't see this Stargate that is building, which is interesting because a Stargate, typically you get it for Arbiters and Carriers, but you can also get for Corsairs, which have a disruption web ability, which when placed on a tank, the tank can no longer shoot. So you can easily disable some Dominion firepower with an air unit that cannot even hit ground. So it's a very interesting trade. Likewise, what Balthazar is likely going to try and do is use Zealots to try and get on top of these tanks. Oops. So right now, we've got this Observers going down. These tanks are laying down a field of fire. All these Zealots are going to die. Cerberus here are like superpowered Hellions. They're tougher, meaner, and they don't turn into firebats. What they do is a lot of damage to light, and they do it on a line, so they're very good at dealing with these Zealots who want to get it on the tanks. The tanks, meanwhile, do bonus damage to these Dragoons, as mentioned, because they are armored, and tanks do a disgusting amount of damage. Now that they're siege, they do 104 to armored, just 2 shots to kill a Zealot. And you can see he's using the Harpy to scout because it's basically disposable. It's mostly just a scout unit. And these 2 Crucio siege tanks can hit all the way up to there. So there's nothing that Balthazar can really place safely here, so long as there is vision. If he was a little bit closer, I think he could place a Reaver there, and it could fire down the ramp and hit the tanks, so long as there was no vision. But I know on Frost LE, a lot of people like to place, say, just a missile turret or something small like that up there, just to ensure that that sort of thing doesn't happen. Right now there is an army moving down to the south. I think he might just be scouting or trying to get a flank around, trying to get around John's vision. Because again, Dominion lack a lot of vision. What they do make up for in vision, though, is the ability to scout and track enemy armies, is they have a lot of very good, very strong defenses. They've got the best anti-air defense, and they have these flame turrets, which are exceptional against light units. What is advised is push out like John has. I'll let this battle play out first. So as you see, the Zealots get absolutely torn to pieces by the Cerberus, and then the Dragoons are forced to retreat. It doesn't matter that John is ahead, John is behind by 1 base. And isn't harvesting as many resources because he is winning these fights before they even start. And so the idea with Dominion is you push out with your siege tanks, you have some support units, typically Cerberus, and also Typhoons, which are anti-air units. I know they look like the unit from StarCraft 2, but you do want they are purely anti-air. And you push out with this ball of units, set up some tanks, and you set up some turrets, and then you set up some flame turrets, missile turrets and flame turrets. The flame turrets go in front of the tanks, in not this close, maybe a little bit further out, because you want to draw the enemy towards them. You want, if your enemy is A-clicking, for them to run into the flame turret first and not aggro to the tank, because flame turrets will do a disgusting amount of damage. And most melee units are light, with the exception of, say, Ultralisks. There is an Archon on the field. Archons are not super tough. I think they have quite a lot of health, but there are many times where they don't feel like they're quite durable enough. And I think that's because they really need these double, just the shield upgrades to really defend, bulk them up. I think there is also, no there isn't. Oh, there it is. There's another Archon shield upgrade, which just gives them an additional 1 shield to make them that little bit tankier. They do pull a respectable amount of damage, 38 to everything, and does splash damage, so they can be quite strong, but unfortunately I find that they have a hard time getting in with only 3 range. They're armored, so they will take 100 damage from a tank shot, which means they will get absolutely devastated. I feel like Balthazar is currently taking the wrong approach, although I like that he has high Templars, but he has no Storm, so this is an interesting position. I think he's trying to get in where the tanks can no longer hit him, but as you see, there are so many tanks all up here, all spread out in a nice even way. So even if he tries to, you know, sort of get around the tanks, he's still going to get hit. He did destroy the expansion before it landed, before it could get away, sorry. And that does mean John's going to have to rebuild it and get delayed. That is a nasty delay. As you can see, this guy, Balthazar, has taken so many expansions now, and that's just because Khala don't have a very effective means to macro. They have to build every single building. They have to build every single gateway they want is 1 unit at a time, whereas other teams have reactors, such as that one on that Dominion factory, which means that's double Cerberus production. Oh, and here we go. He's getting chased down. Nope, he's going to get away. I feel like one of Dominion's real strengths here is this science vessel. It has many good abilities. Against Protoss, one of the best is EMP. That's 100 damage to, say, every unit that has more than 100 shield. For Archons, that is exceptionally damaging. The other thing John has is this Gorgon. It's a very powerful unit. It is a souped-up battlecruiser that just lays waste to most enemy forces once it gets going. You can attack it from the back because it has a very slow turning circle, and that can allow you to get in, but in most direct engagements, you're going to have a hard time finding a way around that when you're dealing with all this army. John's hasn't actually got much coverage down here, so there is still some vulnerability, and he didn't finish that sensor tower, and he's trying to build another one now. I don't know if he's noticed. Oh, yep, there he goes. He's building 2 sensor towers. This will allow him to detect these armies coming around. He might be too slow, though. Oh, no, that one's going to finish, and that should immediately tell him that there is an army there. Nope, oh, it doesn't have enough range. All he can see is there. He might mistake and assume that that is the army when there's actually a big force right there. Hopefully this will save him, because he does not have tanks currently in position to fight this. They could probably safely take that with Dragoons. This going straight in like that is very dangerous. Look at all the tank coverage. The tanks are hitting from all up here. The Archons are down because they do not have that durability. The Gorgon is untouched right now, which is terrifying because it even has a repair ability. John was repairing in that. He didn't use EMP, but that EMP would have been game-changing. Out comes another Gorgon. At this point, the Protoss player really does want to access some air units, such as the Arbiter. Corsairs with Disruption Web can really make a difference. Or, if nothing else, shuttles. Building a group of shuttles and sending them into battle, and then dropping Zealots over the top of these tanks. Because the tanks will automatically aggro to what is nearest, and the tanks will be nearest. The Zealots will be. So here we do have Arbiters coming out. There's a special feature in this game where each team has Terrazine, which produces at an increasing rate. And that, over the course of the game, gates sort of extremely powerful units and extremely powerful upgrades. But it's needed to do that because these Gorgons, as you can see, have 800 HP and they have so much damage and armor. They're such a strong unit that they need this Terrazine to limit how many you can get. And the idea is, over the course of the game, is you might get all these... you might get different upgrades and different units with it, and that really defines how you play. A lot of the earlier harass units, for example, use Terrazine. One such example for Protoss, for Khala, not the only Protoss team, by the way, there is also the Nerazim, but for Khala, there is this instant return ability, and what that does is once it's upgraded, whenever a Zealot dies, your cybernetic score gets an energy up to 7, and then you can pay 50 minerals and 50 gas to instantly get a Dragoon. Here is an interesting situation. That science vessel really needs to be the scout there, because otherwise this Arbiter will just allow this army to go to town. And he's even got this sideswipe force, which I suspect what he's going to try and do is use this open ground to pull John's focus to one side, and then run the Zealots around the side of these tanks, and we'll see how he goes. Oh, that was a very good hit. He hit the Gorgon. I don't know if he's got anything underneath it, but oh, and the science vessel. Very powerful. They're focusing on the missile turret where they should be trying to get to the tanks. I think overall that was a loss for Balthazar, but because of this instant return, now you can see he's already got an army of Dragoons pouring out. He just needs to set that rally point down to the low ground or something so he can easily get it. He's got so much production and resources at this time that even a heavy defeat like that might come out favorable. As John is running out of resources to mine in his main, he's going to have to take a 5th somewhat soon. This is interesting. Oh, I liked that. I wonder if that got any workers. Whoop. Yeah, I think John's been losing workers overall. I don't know if he lost any particularly there, but I do believe so because these tanks do so much damage. 56 to light, and that's with a massive reduction, so those SCVs would die in 2 shots in friendly damage. I don't know if Splash is full damage though. So currently we have everyone's starting to max out their upgrades for damage for all different things. They're producing a lot of units at this point. We've got many of these arbiters on the field. I'll see if I can find one. I don't think they died in the last fight. Oh, here comes a sneaky attack around the side. This is all going to die. That was a waste. Unfortunately, it did get 2 Gorgons, but John has so much firepower. These Gorgons are disgustingly powerful, and if Balthazar doesn't soon get an anti-air unit such as the Scout, doesn't get a carrier to fight it, doesn't get just something with a lot of anti-air power, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. 4 Gorgons is game-winning. Oh, and that's a devastating Storm. Although overall, Storm only does 120 damage, so it doesn't seem to have a big impact. It does look like he lost an additional about 6 workers so far, and really, even if these things are low impact, the amount of resources John is struggling to amass compared to Balthazar means that overall John isn't going to last as the game travels on. He may have full upgrades, he may have a max supply army, and you can actually get upgrades to go over your maximum supply, but he has not so far. But his opponent is just so much larger in terms of resource drawing in and spending. He's got so much. He needs to either start suiciding his forces or just go crazy. I like this. This is an interesting setup. There are so many flame turrets that any A-click will, like, even if you get in the mineral line, your zealots will eventually be drawn back to the fire turrets. And meanwhile, he's pushed out here. I think John has realized this point. Maybe he sent a harpy around. I will have a look real quick. So he has no idea that his opponent has so many bases, and he's just expanding to a 5th and 6th. Probably because his main is almost done and has run out of gas. He's got lots of factories, so he can produce a big army. I like that he's got a couple of reactors. He's trying to sort of push out now. John is going for the supply cap raised. Or is that? No, that's Balthazar, my bad. Balthazar is going to have an absolutely maxed supply cap, which stops at, I think, 280, while John's going for 3rd level tech for ship weapons and ship plating. In this position, like I said, Balthazar needs to focus on getting some air units that will allow him to really push in. I think he is waiting for Arbiters on the Terrazine, but instead he should be getting Corsairs. Corsairs, with their upgrade to Disruption Web, can seriously shut down. Oh, never mind, he did a drop. That was very nasty. So I don't think he's going to get anything major. He got all the workers, but as you can see, there's almost no resources here. Taking out these tech reactors, taking out this planetary fortress, that doesn't mean anything. John has no upgrades coming, so that doesn't mean anything. Taking out the science facility would be a pain, because then he has to rebuild that before he can get any science vessels. This has pulled away some of John's forces, but as you'll see, the science vessel has put defensive matrix on that Gorgon, so for a short amount of time it has 1,000 HP overall. It's got 200 shield and 800 HP, making it probably indestructible. I honestly don't see anyone being able to deal with that. I think John, if he hasn't already built a science facility, will be doing that very soon when he realizes he is no longer able to build them. What was used there was the Archon, the Arbiter recall ability to summon a bunch of troops into the back of John's base. I do hope that Arbiter got away, because that is a very valuable unit with costing so much Terrazine, and that would have meant that he could use it again someday. Arbiters also apply a stealth field that obviously has a very high impact and can freeze units, which you might have seen earlier. John has realized now that there is construction going on down there, and he wants to really hit that. He's probably realized now that his opponent has quite a lot of bases, but he does have a relatively safe vision of this frontal army. Over we go. These Cerberus are going to start slowly chipping that down. The enemy army is moving, but that is very dangerous because of all these tanks. These tanks could easily push up and do a lot of damage if they come in from the wrong angle. But John has no vision down here. If a bunch of zealots ran up or got dropped by a shuttle, there would be no way to protect them. There is currently very little air coverage in John's army, and I do feel like that's an avenue that Balthazar has not taken advantage of. These Dragoons will kill all those Cerberus. John has very little protection on that base as well, but I don't believe Balthazar knows about it. I will just monitor this fight for a moment. That was a poor exchange, but again, Balthazar has the resources to do that. So Balthazar does not know of this, but he does know of the flame turret. Here, John is slowly pushing out with these siege tanks and using the vision from the science vessels. That was also a very good hit. That has taken away all the shield of all these units. And it has also EMP'd, I think, the High Templar's energy, so they won't be able to drop storms. The storms say they do 110 damage, but it's slightly more than that due to the way it applies. Unless this is an older version, which it very well might be. Just keeping an eye on the production. Jonarific has basically maxed out. He can get just a couple more units, but I think he's trying to get some workers up. He's trying to build his bases, and he's trying to push out as well. With 4 Gorgons, he should be able to bully out an enemy force. The only threat he would have from the enemy is if sheer overwhelming numbers came at him. As you can see, it's trying to build more Dragoons from the instant return, but is unable to. This slow creep up is absolutely, I would say, almost vital for Dominion. This is how Dominion wins the game, is they build a sensor tower, they get to know where your army is, they get to move their siege tanks and their Cerberus up, and they provide some sort of aerial support, and then they lay down a bunch of turrets. And if you cannot, you need to find an area of vulnerability in that movement. And like I said, Disruption Web can be an area of vulnerability because it does also work against turrets, but currently this is just going to be a massacre. It doesn't matter that he's coming from 2 sides. With this number of Gorgons and tanks, he's just going to lay down a field of fire, and you'll watch all this army melt, even as it tries to progress in. I'm a little curious where Balthazar's units are. Well, there we go. He has 102 probes, which is taking up 102 supply compared to John's 59. Quite frankly, he needs to lose half of those probes. There's just too many. It doesn't matter how many resources he's producing, he doesn't have the army size to fight John right now, and that is really inhibiting him. 50 probes gone is 25 more Dragoons on the ground that could brute force through this army. And right now, John is just taking the sheer advantage of how strong his army is and just driving it into Balthazar, probably for the win. I don't actually see a way that Balthazar can slow this down. He's even built a perdition turret, flame turret, sorry, to just harass that nexus. Any units that come over will have to then deal with that, though most outrange it. And I do think that means he wants to take this out and then claim these resources. As there is no resources left in Balthazar's main, I can totally understand going around, especially if John, I don't believe he does, but if he had vision of where production is, there are gateways all down here. Taking out this production and resource gain would be a very decent exchange. At this point, if Balthazar could amass a small number of units, he might be able to find, such as Dragoons, he might be able to find an opening in the back as Dragoons outrange these flame turrets. But currently he has, oh, there he goes, he's finally building scouts and carriers. But he needs to be very careful. That's actually a good catch, taking out those science vessels, and John's realized that he's actually got this big opening right now that Balthazar's just walking into. Although Balthazar needs to be careful because he has very little in the way of minerals right now. He's used them basically all, and that has completely sapped up his ability to produce units, and if John can kill what he has currently, he'll be in a very vulnerable state. This is actually good, having this much air force. The main issue is, there we go, the anti-matter missiles, doing 16 damage to air, to armored units, which is very good against these Gorgons, but this is just a bad idea. Oh, that's good. Getting rid of the science vessels would be a huge advantage, but he needs to be careful, because once these Gorgons get into the fight, everything is going to go down. If these carriers will not win in a straight fight with Gorgons, just they will not. and he's lost basically all of his scouts, which was a total waste. The other benefit scouts have is they can teleport to any visible location on the map. If you drive a probe up to your enemy base, you can teleport scouts from your base all the way out there. And I suspect after that failure on the scouts' behalf, I believe these Dragoons have been forgotten by now. There's some High Templars, but I believe after that failure of the scouts, he's stopped building them, which is unfortunate because I really do feel like that was the way to go. Some scouts, Dragoons, carriers, maybe an Arbiter to drop down some sort of a protective field for his units, and then ultimately even some Reavers might have been okay, or a Colossi, but I do feel like John's got this one in the bag right now. He's just moving in for the win. He is getting harassed back at his base. He hasn't turned that into a planetary fortress yet, and he may lose that base, and that's unfortunate. But I think as much as this skirmish is starting to go on a widespread scale, John could just push in right now, take out all of this, all the tech structures, and kill his opponent by tech. His opponent would be forced to rely on very basic units. He's split up his Gorgons now, so he can take out things all over the map, and I think that's a great idea. It means his opponent has to send a significant force to deal with them, especially if he is controlling the Gorgons more intently. Here, the Gorgon's just going to pick off anything that comes out. Gorgons, as you can see, do a disgusting amount of direct damage, and they can also shoot off their flank, but their flank shooting is a lot weaker. John is moving in. Look at all these Stargates. They never really got used. They built the scouts, and then they died, which is very unfortunate because he could really have used Disruption Web. He could really have used scouts. Taking out the science vessels and Gorgons should have been a priority, but I suspect he didn't know, especially when Typhoons weren't on the field for such a long time. These science vessels have such a massive impact between defensive matrix and EMP round. Taking them out and crippling your opponent's ability to produce that unit and use its spells is so important when fighting Dominion. It's one of their vulnerabilities that you need to hit. And also their immobility, because as I said, a few Dragoons up here, he used 2 Archons to take down a base. It's little things like that which can help you get ahead of the Dominion team. Right now, this isn't actually a huge force. If you look at it, it's primarily tanks. If these 2 Gorgons were gone, you know, he'd rely... There we go, there's the GG call. But if these tanks went down, and these Gorgons were killed, say the Gorgons were killed, then it's just Typhoons to defend these tanks. There are quite a lot there, to be honest. But it feels like there were a lot of opportunities to maybe hit this army in some way that Balthazar really didn't capitalize on, especially considering he took so much of the map and he had many opportunities to really take advantage of it and maybe pressure a little bit more. The recoil into the base was good because it sniped the science facility, and if he also got the fusion core maybe, which would massively delay the ability to produce more Gorgons, although I think John stopped building them after a time based off his Terrazine build-up. But he had Gorgons, just so powerful. Yeah, he never had a fusion core back. He never built a Thor, but he didn't really need it. Even though they're very strong, there wasn't enough of an air presence or even a ground presence that can deal with the tanks that the Thor really was needed to build to fight. Overall, it was a very good game. It was impressive to see the players back and forth for so long. It's just unfortunate that Balthazar didn't get his opportunity to really counter the Dominion strategies. I suspect it's something he'd need to play against a few times to learn what tools he has available to him to really deal with them. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this cast, and I hope you join me for the next one.